Hey guys, this is Jeremy of Still Thrill, and I'm going to talk to you about shooting from the hip today. There's a bunch of different videos out there to teach you how to shoot from the hip. I am hopefully going to fill in some of the gaps that I think that they're missing, so I'll be trying to be as comprehensive as I can. So first, you obviously need your camera. And one thing about shooting from the hip is that the camera is usually held in place by the strap, and it also matters where the strap is on your body. So, shooting from the hip can also be just holding the camera down here, but a big reason that you would shoot from the hip is to be inconspicuous, and it looks a little weird to have somebody holding their camera from down here and just shooting like this. So I think it's better just to have the camera strap around you. And then this is typically what people would do. They'll have a camera strap around them like this, and then they shoot from down here. One thing that I think is important to have with your cameras is to have a lens that's wider than 35 millimeters. I haven't had much luck with anything longer than 35 millimeters. Things like 40 millimeters and 50 millimeters. 40 is maybe not so bad, but 50 millimeters and above I think is really getting into a range that's really tough to shoot from the hip. So if you do decide to shoot from the hip, I think you should go wide. And that is for two reasons. The first reason is because when you shoot from the hip, you're not very accurate. It's hard to nail the framing of your subject and to get your subject perfectly where you want them. So capturing more information is better because in post-production you can do some cropping. I don't suggest using everything in post. I shoot a lot of film, so I like analog stuff, and I like getting the image that I want right in the camera as opposed to having to go through my computer and edit things and stuff. It just makes things better if I don't have to do that. But again, it's nicer to have more information in a wide-angle photo because it's hard to frame your subject when you're shooting from the hip and you're not looking through the viewfinder. So that's one reason why you should use a wide-angle lens. Another reason, something about wide-angle lenses is that they have a wide depth of field, and shooting from the hip is very tough to nail your focus. So what you have to do to focus is to use zone focusing, and that requires you to sort of gauge the distance to your subject. So right now, you, inside my camera, my video camera, you're a little bit further away from me than the height of me, and I'm about 6 foot tall. So I always use my distance as how tall I am. I don't know, it's just a good metric for myself, I guess. So you're about six feet away or 7 feet away. So I would look at you or look at whoever I'm trying to photograph and say, oh, he's about 7 feet away, so I'm going to set my focus at about 7 feet. This is what you call zone focusing. It's not very accurate because, again, you're not using your viewfinder, and it is tough to be really precise when you're not using your viewfinder. So one thing about wide-angle lenses is that they have a very wide depth of field, so the chances of you getting something in focus are greater when you're using a wide-angle lens. If you don't completely understand that, then check out some articles on depth of field that will help you out. Some other things, so I've sort of established that you should use nothing really wider than a 35 millimeter. Something about the strap I think is good to mention is that this particular strap allows the camera to hang around my belly button, and this is good for portraits of people that are sitting down. If you are shooting somebody that's standing up and you shoot from down here, I think that the photograph comes out a little awkward. I think that typically if you shoot portraits of people, which I always want to shoot portraits of people on the subway and on the street in general. So typically I like to have the plane of the camera on the same plane as my subject's face. So if somebody's sitting down, their head is usually about that high. So this is about perfect. If somebody is standing up and shooting from the hip up here is a lot better. So if that's the case, ow, hit my funny bone. Alright, danger. This is getting dangerous. Hurting myself here. So with a smaller strap, and this is my Mickey Mouse strap that my dear mother gave to me, the camera is much higher. It's not down here, it's up here. And it's amazing that the distance, you know, from here to here makes a big difference in the perspective of your photograph. So I think for portraits of people standing, this is a better place to be, and even here is even a better place to be, because I like, you know, again, I like to have the plane of my camera to be on the same plane as the person's face that I'm shooting. So that's just something to keep in mind. Something else about shooting from the hip is that the purpose of it is obviously to be inconspicuous. So if you want to be super stealth, super fly TNT stealth, you will do something crazy like this. So for all you cats shooting digital, this won't work for you. But for all you cats shooting film, this will. And if you are a cat who likes to shoot digital, then there are digital remote shutters, a clicker that you can attach to your camera, and you can have a wireless remote, and you can click it and it'll click the shutter. I do not have a wireless remote for my film cameras, but this is a wired remote shutter. So you can see this little doodad comes out right there. This will fit on all of my film cameras, which is nice that it's sort of a universal one. So, but the reason that I am discussing it right now is that what you can do with it is, if you're wearing a jacket, you can actually put the wire through your sleeve and have the remote shutter in your hand. So again, the purpose of street photography is to be incredibly inconspicuous and to take photos surreptitiously. And this is a really great way of doing it. I mean, if you know, it's a little bit more obvious if you're down here like this. It's not that obvious. Most people don't even notice. Some people do. And so it is nice to have something like this. Now, a word of caution, and also just a good tip about shooting from the hip in general, is that you really want to make sure that your camera is really steady. So keep both hands on it, or keep at least one hand on it. I've done some shooting where I just kind of like let it go, and I would shoot like this, but it doesn't work out well. You need to keep your camera really steady, so having at least one hand on it is necessary at all times. So that's one technique that you can try out. Another sort of nifty little gadget that I like to use, that I use with my technique, is these bubble level finders. So it'll go on the hot shoe, and it shows me which way my camera is pointed. Because again, it's really hard to do your framing when you're shooting from down here. So having a bubble level finder is very, very nifty and handy to have, and will help you when you're sitting here and shooting from the hip. So stay safe, don't hurt anybody, and have fun shooting from the hip. Cheers.